The bullet had torn through her shoulder, and the blood pooled beneath her like a crimson shadow spreading across the dusty Colorado ground. But somehow her chest still rose and fell in shallow, desperate breaths. Penelope Vance had been riding with the wrong people, trusted the wrong faces, and now she lay abandoned 3 miles outside Fort Garland in the summer heat of 1876, left to die by the very outlaws who had promised her safe passage to Denver. She had witnessed their robbery gone wrong, seen them shoot an innocent bank clerk, and when she threatened to go to the law, they had turned their guns on her. The leader, a cold-eyed man named Silas Crane, had put a bullet in her and told the others to ride on. They took her horse, her supplies, everything but the life that stubbornly clung to her broken body. Lucas Vance had no relation to the dying woman, though they shared a surname common enough in these parts. He was riding the southern trail back to Fort Garland after delivering a herd of cattle to a ranch near the San Luis Valley. His saddlebags heavy with payment, and his mind occupied with thoughts of a hot meal and a soft bed. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the scrubland in shades of orange and gold, when he spotted what he first took to be a dead animal in the distance. His horse, a gray mare named Sage, nickered nervously as they approached. Lucas dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud, and his heart seized in his chest when he realized it was a woman. She was young, probably no more than 22 or 23, with dark hair matted with blood and dirt. Her dress, once a respectable blue calico, was torn and stained beyond recognition. Lucas dropped to his knees beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. The pulse was there, faint as a whisper but present. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration, her skin pale beneath the grime. The wound in her shoulder still oozed blood, though not as profusely as it must have hours earlier. "No," Lucas said aloud, his voice rough with determination. "You are not dying out here, not today." He worked quickly, pulling his canteen from Sage's saddle and dribbling water onto the woman's lips. She did not respond at first, but then her throat convulsed in a swallow. Encouraged, Lucas tore strips from his spare shirt and pressed them against the wound, trying to stanch the bleeding. She moaned, a sound so filled with pain that it made his jaw clench. He was 26 years old, had been working cattle and horses since he was tall enough to reach a saddle horn, and he had seen injuries before. This was bad but not hopeless, not if he could get her to town. Fort Garland was 5 miles away, too far to carry her on foot. Lucas lifted her as gently as he could, feeling her body go rigid with agony even in her semi-conscious state. He positioned her across Sage's saddle, then swung up behind her, cradling her against his chest to keep her from falling. The mare seemed to understand the urgency, moving at a steady canter that ate up the distance without jostling her passenger too violently. The ride felt endless. Lucas kept one arm locked around the woman's waist, the other holding the reins, and he found himself talking to her in a low, steady voice. "Stay with me now. We are almost there. You are going to be all right. I promise you that." He did not know if she could hear him, but the words seemed necessary, as though his voice alone could tether her to life. Fort Garland was a modest settlement built around the old military fort, a place where ranchers, farmers, and drifters crossed paths. The doctor's office was near the center of town, a small wooden structure with a painted sign that read Dr. Herman Kraft, physician. Lucas practically kicked the door open, shouting for help. The doctor, a gray-haired man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his desk in alarm. "Gunshot wound," Lucas said, carrying the woman to the examination table. "Found her out on the southern trail. She has been bleeding for hours." Dr. Kraft moved with practiced efficiency, ushering Lucas aside and beginning his assessment. Did you see who did this? No. She was alone when I found her. The doctor cut away the makeshift bandages and examined the wound, his expression grave. The bullet went clean through. That is fortunate. But she has lost a great deal of blood and the wound is starting to fester. She needs surgery and she needs it now. Lucas stepped back, feeling suddenly helpless. Will she live? Dr. Kraft glanced at him, his eyes sharp. That depends on her. She has to want to fight. You did well bringing her here so quickly. Without that, she would have had no chance at all. I will pay whatever it costs, Lucas said, surprised by the ferocity in his own voice. He barely knew this woman, did not even know her name, but the thought of her dying was unacceptable. The doctor nodded. Wait outside. This will take some time. Lucas paced the wooden sidewalk outside the office as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and darkness settled over Fort Garland. He had never been a particularly religious man, but he found himself offering up silent prayers to whatever higher power might be listening. The woman's face haunted him, pale and fragile, but there had been something in the set of her jaw, even unconscious, that spoke of strength. She was a fighter. She had to have survived this long. Hours passed before Dr. Kraft emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. She is stable. I removed the damaged tissue and stitched the wound. Now we wait and see if infection sets in. She is young and strong, which works in her favor. Relief flooded through Lucas like cool water. Can I see her? Briefly. She is not conscious and she needs rest. The room smelled of carbolic acid and blood. The woman lay on a narrow bed, covered with a clean white sheet. Her shoulder was heavily bandaged and someone, probably the doctor's wife, had washed the dirt from her face and combed her hair. In the lamplight, Lucas could see that she was beautiful, with strong features and long lashes that lay against her cheeks like dark crescents. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, suddenly exhausted. I do not even know your name, he murmured, but I am glad you are still breathing. He stayed there through the night, dozing fitfully in the chair, waking every time she stirred or made a sound. By morning, his back ached and his eyes felt full of sand, but he would not have been anywhere else. Doctor Kraft checked on his patient at dawn, changing her bandages and trickling water into her mouth. She has made it through the night. That is a good sign. When will she wake up? Could be hours, could be days. The body heals in its own time. Lucas finally left the doctor's office long enough to stable Sage, rent a room at the boarding house, and clean himself up. He ate breakfast without tasting it, his mind constantly drifting back to the woman in Dr. Kraft's care. He should have been heading home to his ranch 20 miles north of town, but he found himself walking back to the doctor's office instead. She woke on the third day. Lucas was sitting in his usual chair beside her bed, reading a newspaper by the afternoon light filtering through the window, when he heard her draw in a sharp breath. He looked up to find her eyes open, wide and confused, the color of dark honey shot through with green. Easy, he said softly, setting the paper aside. You are safe. You are in Fort Garland at the doctor's office. She tried to sit up and gasped at the pain, her hand flying to her bandaged shoulder. Lucas gently pressed her back down. Do not move too quickly. You were shot. You have been unconscious for 3 days. Her lips formed words, but no sound came out. He reached for the water glass on the side table and held it to her mouth, supporting her head while she drank. When she finished, she lay back against the pillow, her eyes never leaving his face. Who are you? Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from disuse. Lucas Vance. I found you out on the trail. You were dying. Memory flickered across her face and he saw fear tighten her features. The Outlaws. They are gone. Do you remember what happened? She closed her eyes and a tear slid down her temple. They shot me. Silas Crane. I saw them kill a man during a robbery, and when I said I would go to the law, he put a bullet in me and told the others to leave me." Anger burned hot in Lucas's chest. "Do you know where they were headed?" "North, I think, maybe Wyoming." She opened her eyes again, looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "Why did you save me?" "You do not know me." The question caught him off guard. "Because you needed help, because leaving you there was not an option." She studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression, a cautious softening. "I am Penelope Vance. I know, same last name. I was traveling from Pueblo to Denver when I made the mistake of accepting a ride from Crane's gang. I thought they were just cowboys." "You are from Pueblo, originally from Kansas." "My parents died 2 years ago, and I have been working as a seamstress, moving from town to town. I was going to Denver because I heard there was good work there." Lucas felt a pang of sympathy. She had been alone, vulnerable, trying to make her way in a harsh world. "You are safe now. Crane and his men will not find you here." Over the following days, Penelope's strength slowly returned. Dr. Kraft was pleased with her progress, though he warned that the shoulder would take weeks to fully heal. Lucas visited every day, sometimes twice a day, bringing her books from the general store and telling her stories about his ranch to pass the time. She was sharp-witted and curious, asking him about his life, his work, the land he called home. "It is not much," he admitted one afternoon, sitting in his customary chair while she propped herself up against the pillows. 500 acres, mostly grazing land. I run cattle and breed horses. It is a hard life, but it is mine." "It sounds wonderful," Penelope said, and he could hear the longing in her voice. "I have never had a place that felt like mine." "Maybe you will someday." She looked at him, and the connection between them seemed to hum like a plucked string. Lucas realized with a start that he had come to care for this woman deeply in a very short time. It was not just her beauty, though she was lovely even in her weakened state. It was her courage, the way she refused to let despair take hold even after everything she had endured. It was the sound of her laugh when he told a particularly bad joke, and the serious way she listened when he talked about his hopes for the future. He was falling in love with her, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. 2 weeks after he had found her, Penelope was strong enough to leave the doctor's office. She had no money, no belongings except the ruined dress she had arrived in. Mrs. Kraft had kindly lent her a simple gray dress and a shawl, but Penelope's situation was precarious. She could not afford lodging, and her injury made physical work impossible for the time being. Lucas made his decision on the walk back from the doctor's office to the boarding house, where Penelope was to meet him for supper. He found her waiting on the porch, looking out at the mountains with a wistful expression. "Come to my ranch," he said without preamble. She turned, her eyes wide. "What? Come to my ranch? You need a place to recover, and I have plenty of room. My housekeeper, Mrs. Dorothy Chen, is there. She is a respectable widow from San Francisco who keeps the place running while I am out working the herd. You would not be alone with me if that is your concern." Penelope's cheeks flushed. "Lucas, I cannot impose on you like that. You have already done so much. It is not an imposition. I want you there." He took a breath, deciding to be honest. "I care about you, Penelope. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, I have come to care a great deal. I know this is sudden, and I am not asking for anything from you except the chance to see you safe and well." Her expression softened, and she reached out to touch his hand. "I care about you too. I did not expect to feel this way, especially after everything that happened, but you have been so kind, so steady. I would like to come to your ranch if the offer is genuine." "It is genuine," he said, feeling his heart lift. "We can leave tomorrow if you are well enough to travel." The journey to Lucas's ranch took half a day, traveling slowly to accommodate Penelope's injury. She rode beside him on a gentle mare he had purchased from the livery, and he watched her carefully for signs of fatigue. But she seemed stronger with each passing mile, her face turned toward the sun, breathing in the clean mountain air. The ranch sat in a valley with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising like a wall to the east. It was beautiful in a raw, untamed way, with wildflowers dotting the grasslands and a clear stream running through the property. The house itself was modest but well built, constructed of logs and stone, with a wide porch that looked out over the pastures where cattle grazed. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, a tiny woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Lucas had sent word ahead, so she was expecting them. She looked Penelope over with shrewd eyes, then nodded as if satisfied. "You look like you have been through hell and back," she said bluntly. "Come inside. I have soup on the stove and a room prepared for you." Penelope laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made Lucas smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. That sounds perfect." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Lucas's life. Penelope settled into the rhythm of the ranch, her strength returning gradually. She helped Mrs. Chen with light tasks around the house, mending clothes and tending the vegetable garden. In the evenings, she and Lucas would sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing while the sun set behind the mountains. They grew closer with each passing day. Lucas taught her to ride properly, taking her out on gentle trails where they could watch the wildlife and enjoy the silence. She told him about her childhood in Kansas, about her dreams of one day opening her own dress shop. He found himself imagining a future where those dreams could come true here with him. One evening, nearly a month after she had arrived at the ranch, they were sitting by the stream that ran through the property. The water burbled over smooth stones, and fireflies danced in the growing darkness. Penelope had been quiet all evening, a thoughtful look on her face. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, leaning back on his elbows in the grass. She turned to him, her eyes serious. "I am thinking about how strange life is. A few months ago, I was alone in Pueblo, barely scraping by, wondering if I would ever find a place where I belonged. Then I nearly died in the worst way imaginable. And now I am here with you and I feel more at home than I ever have." Lucas sat up, his heart pounding. "Penelope, I need to tell you something. I love you. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you fighting for your life out there in the dust. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I want you to stay here. Not as a guest, but as my wife, if you will have me." Her breath caught and tears shimmered in her eyes. "Lucas, I love you too. I have been afraid to say it, afraid that it was too soon or that I was just grateful for everything you have done. But it is more than that. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, the taste of salt from her tears mingling with the warmth of her lips. It felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece of himself he had not known was lost. They were married in Fort Garland 6 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Dr. Kraft and his wife attended, along with Mrs. Chen and a handful of ranchers Lucas knew from the area. Penelope wore a dress she had sewn herself, pale yellow with lace at the collar, and she looked so beautiful that Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with all the love and promise he could pour into that single moment. The small gathering erupted in applause, and Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, muttering something in Cantonese that Lucas suspected was both sentimental and sarcastic. The reception was held at the boarding house, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Lucas held Penelope close as they swayed to the music, her head resting on his shoulder, and he silently thanked whatever force had led him down that trail on that particular evening. She had been left for dead, discarded like she meant nothing, and he had refused to let her slip away. Now she was his wife, his partner, the center of his world. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable pattern. Penelope proved to be a quick learner, taking on more responsibilities as her shoulder fully healed. She worked alongside Lucas during branding season, her face flushed with exertion and determination. She learned to keep the books, managing the ranch's finances with a sharp mind for numbers that impressed him. She even learned to shoot, practicing with an old rifle until she could hit a target at 50 yards. "I will never be helpless again," she told him one afternoon, after putting 3 bullets through the center of a tin can. "I will never let anyone make me a victim." Lucas understood. The trauma of what she had endured would always be a part of her, but she was transforming it into strength. He loved her all the more for it. They heard news of Silas Crane's gang 6 months after their wedding. A deputy marshal passing through Fort Garland stopped by the ranch to inform them that Crane and 2 of his men had been killed in a shootout with law enforcement near Cheyenne. The remaining gang members had been arrested and were awaiting trial. "They will hang," the marshal said matter-of-factly. "They are wanted for multiple murders and robberies across 3 territories." Penelope received the news with a quiet nod. That night, she and Lucas sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I thought I would feel something," she said. "Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. But I just feel tired." Lucas put his arm around her, pulling her close. "You do not have to feel anything. That part of your life is over. Crane cannot hurt you anymore, and neither can anyone else." "I know," she said softly. "I have you now. I have this life. That is all that matters." Spring came, bringing new calves and foals, and with it, another piece of news. Penelope told Lucas one evening over supper, her eyes bright with a mixture of joy and nervousness. "I am pregnant." Lucas stood so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. "You are certain?" she laughed. "I am certain. Dr. Kraft confirmed it yesterday when I rode into town with Mrs. Chen. We are going to have a baby, Lucas." He swept her into his arms, mindful of her still healing shoulder, and spun her around. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Penelope, you have made me the happiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Penelope chafed at being unable to do all the work she was accustomed to. Lucas and Mrs. Chen conspired to keep her from overexerting herself, a task that proved challenging given her stubborn nature. But as the months passed and her belly grew round, she finally conceded to taking things easier. They spent long evenings discussing names, making plans for the future, imagining what their child would be like. Lucas built a cradle from pine wood, carving delicate designs into the headboard. Penelope sewed tiny clothes, her needle flashing in the lamplight as she worked. Their son was born on a cold November night, arriving with a lusty cry that filled the house. Dr. Kraft presided over the birth, with Mrs. Chen assisting, while Lucas paced the floor outside the bedroom like a caged animal. When he was finally allowed in, he found Penelope exhausted but radiant, holding a red-faced, squalling bundle. "Meet your son," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Lucas took the baby carefully, terrified he might break something so small and perfect. The infant's cries quieted and he opened his eyes, unfocused but curious. Lucas felt his heart expand in his chest, filled with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise you, I will always keep you safe." They named him Thomas James Vance after both their fathers. Thomas was a healthy, happy baby who brought joy and chaos in equal measure to the household. Penelope adapted to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything, and Lucas marveled at her strength. She had survived being shot and left to die, had rebuilt her life from nothing, and now she cradled their son with a fierce protectiveness that he understood completely. The years passed in a blur of hard work, laughter, and love. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Lucas expanded the herd, and Penelope started a small business making custom leather goods, her skill with a needle translating well to working with tougher materials. They hired a few ranch hands to help with the growing operation, good men who respected Penelope as much as they did Lucas. 2 years after Thomas was born, their daughter arrived, a tiny, dark-haired girl they named Margaret Rose. She was quieter than her brother had been, with serious eyes that seemed to take in everything. Penelope recovered quickly from the birth, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of children playing and laughing. Lucas sometimes thought back to that day on the trail when he had found Penelope barely clinging to life. It seemed like a lifetime ago, though it had only been a handful of years. She had been a stranger then, a dying woman he had refused to let go. Now she was everything, his wife, his partner, the mother of his children. She was his home. One evening when Thomas was 4 and Margaret was 2, they sat on the porch as they often did, watching the children play in the yard. Penelope leaned against Lucas, her head on his shoulder, and sighed contentedly. "You ever think about what might have happened if you had ridden a different trail that day?" she asked. Lucas tightened his arm around her. "Every day, but I also believe some things are meant to be. I was meant to find you. We were meant to build this life together." She tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes shining with love. "I was so close to giving up out there. I could feel myself slipping away, and part of me wanted to let go. But then I heard your voice, telling me to stay, telling me I would be all right. You gave me a reason to fight. You gave me a reason to hope," he replied. "Before you, I had the ranch, I had my work, but I did not have this. I did not have a family, a future worth building. You changed everything." She kissed him, soft and lingering, and he tasted the promise of all the years still to come. They had weathered the worst that life could throw at them and had come out stronger on the other side. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Lucas held his wife close and watched their children play. Thomas was chasing fireflies, his laughter ringing out clear and bright, while Margaret toddled after him, determined not to be left behind. Mrs. Chen called from the doorway that supper was ready, and the family rose to go inside, Lucas scooping up Margaret while Penelope took Thomas by the hand. The house was warm and filled with the smell of fresh bread and stew. They gathered around the table, saying grace before the meal, and Lucas looked at the faces of his family, these people he loved more than life itself. This was what he had fought for when he refused to let Penelope die. This was the life they had built together, from ashes and blood and sheer determination. Years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses. Margaret developed a talent for drawing, covering every scrap of paper she could find with pictures of the ranch and the mountains. Lucas and Penelope added a third child to their family, another son named William, who arrived with a shock of red-gold hair and a temperament as sunny as a summer day. The ranch continued to thrive. Lucas's horses gained a reputation for quality throughout Colorado, and Penelope's leather goods were sought after as far away as Denver. They built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Mrs. Chen, now in her 60s but still sharp as a tack, presided over the household with affectionate tyranny, making sure everyone was fed and the children minded their manners. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Penelope with a trip to Denver. They left the children in Mrs. Chen's capable care and took the train north, staying in a fine hotel and attending the theater. Penelope wore a dress of deep blue silk, one she had made herself, and Lucas thought she had never looked more beautiful. As they walked through the city streets after the performance, hand in hand, Penelope stopped suddenly, looking into the window of a shop. It was a dressmaker's establishment with elegant gowns displayed on mannequins. "I used to dream about having a shop like this," she said softly. "When I was alone in Pueblo, struggling to make ends meet, I would imagine walking past a window with my name on it." Lucas studied her face in the gaslight. "Do you still want that?" She turned to him, a small smile on her lips. "I thought I did. But I realized I already have everything I dreamed of and more. I have a home, a family, work that fulfills me. That old dream was about proving I could survive alone, but I am not alone anymore." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You never will be again, I promise you that." They returned to the ranch renewed and happy, throwing themselves back into the rhythms of daily life. Thomas, now 12, was taking on more responsibility with the horses, showing a natural talent for training. Margaret, 10 years old, helped her mother with the leather work and the household accounts, her attention to detail impressive for her age. William, at 8, was the family's daredevil, always climbing trees or racing his pony across the pastures, giving his parents regular heart attacks. One afternoon in late summer, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was a weathered man in his 50s, wearing a badge that identified him as a territorial judge. Lucas met him at the gate, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle in his saddle holster. "Are you Lucas Vance?" the judge asked. "I am. What is your business here?" "I am looking for a woman named Penelope Vance, formerly Penelope Vernon before her marriage. I have information regarding an inheritance." Lucas relaxed slightly, though he remained cautious. "She is my wife. Wait here and I will get her." Penelope came out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression curious. The judge dismounted and removed his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Vance, I am Judge Harold Whitmore. I have been searching for you for some time. Your uncle, Samuel Vernon, passed away 6 months ago. He left his entire estate to you as his only surviving relative." Penelope stared at him in shock. "Uncle Samuel? I have not seen him since I was a child. I did not even know he was still alive. He made his fortune in mining up in Leadville. When he fell ill, he hired investigators to find you. It took them this long to track you down. The estate is worth approximately $40,000. The number hung in the air like something impossible. Lucas felt his jaw drop. Penelope clutched his arm, her face pale. $40,000, she repeated faintly. "Yes, madam. There is also a house in Leadville and various business holdings. Everything is yours, free and clear. I have the paperwork here for you to sign." They invited the judge inside, and over coffee, he explained the details of the inheritance. Samuel Vernon had been a shrewd businessman who had invested wisely in mining claims and real estate. He had never married, and had remembered his niece from his youth, the daughter of his only brother. After the judge left, Penelope and Lucas sat at the kitchen table, staring at each other in disbelief. $40,000, Penelope said again. "I do not even know what to do with that kind of money." Lucas took her hand. "It is your money. You can do whatever you want with it." She was quiet for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. "I know exactly what I want to do. I want to expand the ranch. I want to buy more land, build better facilities for the horses. I want to set aside money for the children's education, make sure they have opportunities we never had. And I want to donate to the church in Fort Garland, help them build the school they have been talking about for years. Lucas felt pride swell in his chest. That is my Penelope. Always thinking of others. I also want to buy you a new saddle, she added, her eyes twinkling. The one you have is falling apart. He laughed, pulling her into his arms. Deal. The inheritance transformed their already successful ranch into one of the most prosperous in the region. They purchased an additional 1,000 acres, expanding their grazing land and water rights. Lucas built a state-of-the-art stable facility, and Penelope invested in breeding stock that would improve their herd's bloodlines. They hired more hands, paying fair wages that attracted skilled workers. True to her word, Penelope also made a substantial donation to the Fort Garland Church, which enabled the construction of a proper schoolhouse. When it opened, Thomas, Margaret, and William attended, along with children from the surrounding ranches. Penelope served on the school board, advocating for quality education and fair treatment of all students, regardless of background. The years continued their steady march. Thomas grew into a tall, capable young man who took over most of the horse training operations. At 18, he married a rancher's daughter named Elizabeth, a smart, hard-working woman who fit into the family seamlessly. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property, and within a year, Lucas and Penelope became grandparents to a red-faced, squalling boy named Lucas James, after his grandfather. Holding his grandson for the first time, Lucas felt the years fold back on themselves. He remembered holding Thomas like this, and before that, he remembered finding Penelope in the dust, her life bleeding away. Every moment since then had been a gift, a second chance they had seized with both hands. Margaret followed her own path, showing no interest in settling down young. She attended a teaching college in Denver, funded by her inheritance from her parents, and returned to Fort Garland to teach at the school her mother had helped build. She was passionate and dedicated, earning the respect of students and parents alike. William, true to his adventurous nature, joined the Territorial Rangers for a few years, helping maintain law and order across the vast Colorado landscape. But the ranch always called him home, and by his 23rd birthday, he had returned to work alongside his father and brother, his wild streak tempered by experience but his spirit still bright. Lucas and Penelope grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had built something extraordinary from nothing, had raised children who made them proud, had contributed to their community in meaningful ways. The scars of the past, both physical and emotional, had faded into stories they told by the fire, cautionary tales and testaments to survival. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children surprised them with a party that brought together what seemed like half of Colorado. Friends from Fort Garland and beyond filled the ranch, celebrating the couple who had become pillars of the community. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and when Lucas took Penelope in his arms for a waltz, the crowd fell back to watch. 25 years, Lucas murmured, holding her close. And I love you more today than I did the day we married. I love you more than I did the day you found me dying and refused to let go, Penelope replied. You gave me life, Lucas. Everything good in my world exists because you would not let me die. We gave each other life, he corrected gently. You saved me just as much as I saved you. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You taught me what it meant to truly live. They danced as the sun set, surrounded by family and friends, their children and grandchildren watching with affection. It was a moment of perfect happiness, the kind that comes rarely in life, but is treasured all the more for its rarity. More years passed. Lucas and Penelope eventually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, turning over management to Thomas and William while they enjoyed a well-earned semi-retirement. They traveled, visiting places they had only read about, but they always came home to the ranch, to the mountains and the grasslands that had witnessed their love story. Margaret married late, at 32, to a widowed doctor who had moved to Fort Garland. They had one child, a daughter, and Margaret continued her teaching work, balancing family and career with the same determination her mother had shown. When Lucas turned 65 and Penelope 64, they decided to compile their story for their grandchildren. They spent long winter evenings writing it down, arguing good-naturedly over details, laughing at memories both sweet and painful. It became a family treasure, a reminder of where they had come from and what they had overcome. "I want them to know that love is worth fighting for," Penelope said one evening, her hair now more silver than brown, her face lined with the years but still beautiful to Lucas. "I want them to know that even when things seem darkest, there is always hope." "They will know," Lucas assured her. "They see it every day in how we live our lives." As they entered their 70s, health concerns began to arise, as they do for everyone. Lucas developed arthritis in his hands, making certain tasks difficult. Penelope's shoulder, injured so many years ago, ached in cold weather. But they adapted, supporting each other through every challenge, just as they always had. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by an enormous family. Thomas and Elizabeth had given them 4 grandchildren. Margaret and her husband had 2. William and his wife, whom he had married at 30, had 3. The ranch house overflowed with life and laughter. Multiple generations gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. Lucas stood to give a toast, his voice still strong despite his years. "50 years ago, I found a woman dying on the side of a trail. I did not know her name. I did not know anything about her except that she was fighting to live. Something in me recognized something in her, a kindred spirit, maybe, or just the stubborn refusal to give up. I brought her here to this ranch and she made it a home. Everything you see here, this family, this legacy, it all started because neither of us was willing to quit." Penelope rose beside him, taking his hand. "Lucas likes to say he saved me, and it is true. But what he does not always acknowledge is that I saved him too. We saved each other, and then we built a life worth saving. That is what I hope all of you take from our story. Love is not just about the grand romantic gestures. It is about choosing each other every single day, through the good times and the hard times, and building something that lasts." The family erupted in applause, and Lucas kissed his wife to whistles and cheers from their grandchildren. They lived to see their great-grandchildren, tiny babies who represented the future they had fought so hard to secure. Lucas held little Penelope Catherine, named after her great-grandmother, and felt the circle complete itself. From death and violence had come all this life, all this love. It was a miracle, he thought, the kind that happened every day when people refused to give up on each other. On a warm spring morning, when Lucas was 78 and Penelope 77, they rowed out together to the stream where he had proposed all those years ago. It was harder now, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but they managed. They sat by the water, holding hands, listening to the familiar burble of the current over stones. "I have been thinking about that day you found me," Penelope said. "I was so close to dying, Lucas. I could feel the darkness pulling at me, but I heard your voice and I held on. Do you know why?" "Why?" he asked softly. "Because your voice sounded like home. I did not have a home then, did not know what it felt like, but somehow I knew. If I could just stay alive a little longer, I would find it with you. Lucas felt tears prick his eyes. You are my home, Penelope. You always have been. They sat there until the sun began to set, then rode slowly back to the ranch, to the house filled with memories and love. That night, they fell asleep in each other's arms, just as they had every night for 50 years. Lucas passed away peacefully 2 years later in his sleep, with Penelope beside him. He simply did not wake one morning, slipping away without pain or fear. Penelope grieved deeply, but without regret. They had lived a full, rich life together, had loved each other completely, and had left a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. She followed him a year later, her heart finally giving out after 8 decades of fierce, determined beating. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed, and her last words were, "I see him. Lucas is waiting for me." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, and one additional line that Thomas had chosen: 2 souls who refused to quit. The ranch continued under Thomas's management, then passed to his children and grandchildren. The house Lucas had built was expanded and renovated over the years, but the original structure remained, a testament to the man who had built it with his own hands. Penelope's leather goods became family heirlooms, treasured and carefully preserved. The story of how they met, how Lucas had found Penelope dying and refused to let her go, became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation. In Fort Garland, the school Penelope had helped build still stood, and a plaque in the entryway honored her contribution to the community. The church held a memorial service attended by what seemed like the entire town, people coming to pay respects to a woman who had embodied strength and grace. Their love story, which had begun with blood and desperation on a dusty Colorado trail, had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. From the moment Lucas had found Penelope's faint heartbeat and made the decision that she would not die, they had been bound together. Through every challenge, every triumph, every quiet moment of everyday life, they had chosen each other. They had built a family, a legacy, and a love that would be remembered for generations. The ranch still stood, prosperous and beautiful, a monument to 2 people who had refused to let death or despair win. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the grass and the sun painted the mountains gold, some said you could still feel their presence. 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and had created something eternal. Their story was proof that love, real love, could overcome anything. That even in the darkest moments, when death seemed certain and hope was almost gone, choosing to fight, choosing to live, choosing to love could change everything. Lucas had refused to let Penelope die that day on the trail, and in return, she had given him a reason to truly live. Together, they had created a legacy that would endure long after the last of the Wild West had faded into history, a testament to the power of love, determination, and the simple, extraordinary decision to not give up on each other.